And with that, we should be live and everything should be good. How's it going, guys? I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. And if not, maybe I'll be able to fix that. Well, actually, no. Today's topic is not that great. Anywho, how we doing? So, does Crowder know his right from his left? I don't think so. So, I hope you guys are having a wonderful time so far. Today's topic is something that originally was going to be a video. However, as it turns out, since Hammered Out went until about midnight-ish my time yesterday, or actually a little past midnight my time, that made it very difficult for me to actually get a video out because that gave me a 6-hour window, and I still had to clean our back patio and all kinds of other chores around the house, so I didn't have time to actually turn this into an edited video. So instead, today you guys get a live stream. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. So, that also means I get a chance to hang out with you guys instead of just putting out a video and then looking at comments. So there is a benefit to this as well. Yeah, no, chores suck. Chores especially suck when you're an adult and you've got to be the one that motivates yourself to do them because nobody can tell you to do them or not. So that kind of blows. But besides that, everything else is perfectly fine. Dracoris Felving says, shut up and take my money for $5. Well, thank you very much, Dracoris. Also, if you guys notice, there's a little, like, tally stream up there for rent stuff. I know it says rent. I tried to change it the other day to actually be house payment, but I'm apparently really, really bad at that. It's not like a dedicated fundraiser or anything. If you guys can't do anything to it, that's cool. But I figured I would go ahead and throw that stuff up there whenever I'm doing streams. That way you guys know, like, essentially where money's going. Super chats don't go to that because I don't see super chats until like a month and a half after they go out, and then even then I only see like 60% of the actual money that comes from them because YouTube likes to take all the money. Speaking of super chats, though, we do have Decida Sum agenda. How about the religious hiding known pedos? Yeah, that would be considered an agenda. That would definitely be considered an agenda to me. But you know, what are you gonna do? Crowder and thinking isn't his biggest strong suit. That said, the video itself, if you guys want to watch it afterwards, will be sourced in the description below. I forgot to put it in there before, but I've got you guys covered. It's in there now. So if you guys wanted to go to Steven Crowder's channel and see this video afterwards, you are more than welcome to, if that is the thing you wanted to do. All right. That said, let us begin with a little bit of backstory on this. So if anybody's aware, Steven Crowder does this thing, and I'm pulling back to his coming up stuff. Steven Crowder does this thing where he likes to have skits in the middle of his presentation, and it makes it very watchable. But let's just say that Steven Crowder and Nuance are kind of worst enemies. He is still demonetized from what I understand. And I could at least empathize with that because every one of my videos gets demonetized with the exception of like 2. I think I have about like a 20% monetization rate where like 80% of my videos get demonetized and 20% stay up. And it really sucks because when you do get a video demonetized, it does very, very slightly affect its placing in the algorithm. You get recommended a little less. You still get recommended to your core audience. People who subscribe to you still get stuff. But getting recommended outside of that is a little bit harder. So I can at least empathize with the demonetization. But at the same time, the guy's a multimillionaire, and I'm working off essentially YouTube minimum wage. So I guess I only care so much. I take it the 20% is the shit posting videos. Sometimes. Alrighty. With that said, let us begin the video now that we've gotten into the whole Steven Crowder doesn't really care about Nuance terribly much, so you guys are prepared for that. Also, because he is demonetized, I think, I could be wrong, but I think he's able to be a little more flagrant with his speech on YouTube, and as a result, if anything like really upsetting gets said by Crowder, I'm sorry, but again, it's Steven Crowder, and that is what he do.
Right? Used to say, oh, if you don't like gay marriage, don't get gay married.
Right, exactly.
But what if I don't like children being subjected to societal pedophilia? Well, then don't be a part of society.
All right, we're beginning with a bit of a false equivalence there. Also, Joshua Wilmot says, Necosaurus is cute. Also, you're amazing, Waldford. Thank you very much for that, by the way. So we're beginning with a false equivalence, but I don't think I need to get into that terribly much because that is a snippet for his coming up segment. So we'll address that afterwards. Oh, we heard that he's monetized again? Hold up. That sounds like something I need to fact check. Is Steven Crowder still demonetized? I believe he's still demonetized. He can appeal for it after 30 days, though. So, but I'm not saying anything about him being monetized again, unless he just got monetized and hasn't told anybody. That would be a little disingenuous on his part. But again, I'm not gonna accuse him of being disingenuous when I have no evidence. Dracoris says $2. Oh, it's Crowder. I'll get my liquor. I know how you feel.
All right, so this is the context. Another question of the day. Do you think that the whole push for pedophilia now has become mainstream? At what point does it become mainstream?
Yeah.
And how far, we're not just going down a slippery, it's not a slippery slope. It's like we're going down the slope in a flying saucer with the cereal varnish from Christmas Vacation.
Okay, so he's trying to say that as a method of saying, hey, by the way, before anybody accuses me of the slippery slope fallacy, we're already on the slope and we're falling all the way down. Not necessarily something that I agree with, but we haven't really gotten into any meat in the video for me to respond to yet. I haven't seen the thing that he's talking about, so I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say that at the very least I'll suspend judgment.
Yes. It is remarkable.
Yeah. Nice. That's crazy.
Yesterday. Gosh, it seems like it was a week ago. Mario Lopez, he was attacked because he had the gall. He had the stones, mind you, to say that parents should be careful about 3-year-olds choosing their gender, right?
Okay, so let's check that real quick. Obviously, we have a Mario Lopez statement on gender. Well, let's take a look at that statement that he said. The actual statement. Continue. Continue to cite. I just want to read the thing. Okay. Where? He's been on PragerU, of course. Okay, so his exact quote is, I'm kind of blown away too. I'm never one to tell anyone how to parent their kids, obviously. And if I think you come from a place of love, you really can't go wrong. But at the same time, my God, if you're 3 years old and you're saying you're feeling a certain way, or you think you're a boy or girl or whatever the case may be, I just think it's dangerous as a parent to make that determination. It's sort of alarming. And my gosh, I just think about the repercussions later on. Yes? Hello. Lopez and Owens then continue to conflate gender identity and sexual orientation. When you're a kid, you don't know anything about sexuality yet. You're just a kid. Yeah, that is a conflation. That is a huge conflation problem. As a kid at 3 years old, you're not going to be able to tell whether or not you're attracted to a particular sex. However, you will be able to tell a little easier something about your self-identity. Now, is that something that's going to be set in stone? Absolutely freaking not. This is why we don't do surgeries on children at 3 years old. And anybody that's advocating for surgeries on children at 3 years old is, even if they're coming from a place of love, I do think they're wrong. However, we do have the ability to use puberty blockers. But again, you don't use puberty blockers at 3 years old either, from what I understand, because at 3 years old, there's no chance. There's a 99% chance that you will not be dealing with puberty of any sort. So there's no need to even worry about the puberty blockers yet. So the only thing that comes up in the conversation at that point is, well, if you're a parent, take note that your child said that and file it in the back of your brain. And then 5 or 6 years later, you might need to come back to that. That's something that you might need to deal with. But you don't take action at 3 years old. You just take it into consideration. So I do see that I do see problems with Mario Lopez's statement. The first one is the conflation, obviously, with gender and sexuality. These are very different things. These are things that to conflate the two is to either be ignorant or dishonest, and I don't think that there's a middle ground between those two. So that's the first issue I see. The second one is that when you are a public figure, when you make a statement that is either ignorant or dishonest, and there isn't a middle ground, then I have an issue, because as a public figure, when you make that statement, you're either being ill-informed or you're lying to your audience. That causes me some problems. I'm okay with the ill-informed. If you're just ill-informed, that can be corrected. If you're lying, That's harder to correct. But, so we've got the Mario Lopez statements for context. That is my thought on those statements. Let us continue with Crowder.
He was forced to apologize.
That's insane. Absolutely insane.
So think about that for a second before we move on to how this relates to sort of pedophilia and this hyper-sexualization of children and how it's become mainstream. Think of...
All right. So we've begun pedophilia of children and hypersexualization of children. All right. So we need to first define a few things, and I'm sure Crowder's not going to do that. First thing is we need to define what hypersexualization is. What does he consider hypersexualization of anyone, let alone a child? And two, how can we relate that to something like pedophilia? I don't know if we can immediately without context. Because without context, just telling an 11-year-old child, and this is not hypersexualization, but telling an 11-year-old child, hey, it's okay if you find that you're attracted to guys. I knew when I was 11 years old that I was attracted to girls. Halfway because I've watched things like Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon, so I could tell that, okay, yeah, no, the big buff guys kind of don't want to, doesn't give me weird feelings in my under area that I can't understand. However, Sailor Moon did cause me to have some issues, and that was earlier on than even that. That was something I was dealing with in elementary school. So I was young enough that I would be in like Crowder's purview of these people don't know what they want at that age, but I did. I understood that. This is why I have a problem when parents tell their kids, "Oh, you'll grow out of it." Like, what have we heard before? Being bi is a phase. Being gay is a phase. Whenever we hear stuff like that, it bothers me because I'm like, no, I knew what the fuck I liked at 5, or not 5, but like by 7 or 8, I knew. I didn't question. Like by the time I was 16, there wasn't a thought in my head that, you know, that masked guy over there looks really good. I think I might want to put my pee-pee in him. That's not a thing that crossed my mind because I'm straight. However, if there is somebody, and there's thousands of them, millions of them, where that is a thought that crosses their mind at that age, then cool. You know what you're attracted to now. Go figure. It's that easy. We do have a $5 donation from Jakaris Felving. Crowder's the type that would say that sex ed is, quotation marks, as it's sexual knowledge at an early age. But sexual knowledge at an early age is perfectly understandable. Like, I didn't actually get sex ed at all because I went to a Christian private school. So, like, let me tell you the conversations that happen when you go to a Christian private school and you don't receive sex ed. Okay? These are the conversations that happen. You have your first girlfriend, and you're talking about oral sex, something you hadn't considered before. The only reason you even know this is a thing is because you happen to be in the age of the internet where you're able to watch porn. And the thought crosses your mind, hey, I can't get a sexually transmitted disease from oral sex because it's not sex. Because in my mind, sex was just penetrative, specifically penis into vagina, and nothing else was sex. That was a weird, dumb way of wording it, but that is how I felt as a kid, because I was fucking dumb and did not actually have sexual education. So me talking to my girlfriend at the time who had gone to public schooling and actually did get sexual education, I got very firmly corrected on that. Very, very quickly. So yeah, no. Whenever somebody's like, oh yeah, no, you shouldn't get sex at an early age, bullshit. Bullshit. If you're at an age where they think that you might have a chance of exploring down that route, then having the education to know what to do and not to do is very freaking important. Wait, you can get STDs from oral? Yes, you can, of course. If the liquid shoots out and you're touching the bits that have the liquid, then yeah, the liquid doesn't even have to shoot out at that point. So no, that is Jacora's ranting for $2. Amen, sorry, just ranting. No, I understand that. I understand just ranting. Believe me, I'm doing the same thing. So I've lived the experience of being a kid who didn't have a sexual education and had to learn these things that way. The way that I learned these things was because my mom let me watch Species at a young age, and by watching Species, I started to get those really awkward feelings. And it's probably why, like, Monster Girl stuff doesn't bother me. I don't see that as weird, because, like, the first naked woman I saw was in Species, and if you guys have seen that movie, you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, that's a thing. Dragon Master says, sir, it's a place where they have accident-only sex ed. See a massive jump in STDs. I didn't even get the abstinence-only sex ed. I didn't get the experience of learning this was a thing at all until I was watching movies that had this in it. And then from there, I had to ask my mom what this is. Okay, so MUI Pikachu says, I don't, but please tell me more. Okay, so Species, for those who don't know, is a movie. It's a sci-fi movie. It's an old sci-fi classic about an alien that gets captured by the government, and the alien assumes a human form. It replicates the things around it, including behaviors. The alien then starts to realize that it needs to breed to propagate its species, and because it's taken a human form, it can breed with humans. So it goes to one of the first humans that will take it home, and sees that, oh, he wants to have sex with her. It sees porn for the first time on his TV and learns what sex is through that, and then tries doing that to him. But because it's an alien that doesn't understand social cues, it responds by going, I want to have babies with you, as opposed to, I want to fuck you, or whatever else you would say for sex. That is how it goes about that. They end up doing the thing, and the guy ends up freaking out because apparently in the Species universe, whenever aliens are having sex, they start to revert into their alien form more than their human form. So you start seeing spikes come out of the spine and all kinds of shit like that. And every single time, the person who freaked out on her during sex gets killed before she can get impregnated. So the entire movie is just her running around trying to get impregnated and murdering people because they freak out during sex. Basically, the sex was too kinky for them, and they freaked out, so they died. It's a very, very strange movie, like, thinking about it in hindsight, but as a kid watching it, it just seemed like, I don't know, you know how when you're a kid and you're watching stuff and all of it just seems like it's normal? You don't question it? I guess this is the same way people are with a lot of, like, 80s cartoons, where everything's normal, and then you look back at it and you go, that was actually kind of awkward. So, regardless, that was how I learned what the sex thing was. That's not the most healthy way to learn that. Just saying. Anyway, continuing with Crowder.
What that apology signifies. Okay? He is saying, I am sorry for suggesting that parents shouldn't allow their 3-year-old or 4-year-old or 8-year-old child to make a permanent decision regarding puberty blockers and stunting their growth for the rest of their life. I am so...
All right, we got a problem. We already got a problem. How do the puberty blocker work? All right. So, how do puberty blockers work? What do they do? Why are they important? Why are they incredibly important for children who may or may not be trans? Well, let's see here. When it comes to puberty blockers, what they do is they block the hormones, testosterone and estrogen, that lead to your body undergoing its changes during puberty. Now, does it eliminate these things? No. Is anybody in the chat familiar with the difference between a synapse firing and that electrical signal being received? I know we're dealing with signals right now and not just chemicals. Chemicals work the same way. So let's just work this to chemicals. Instead of synapses, we're just going to work this to chemicals. So let's say that you have dopamine, right? Dopamine, the happy drug, and you are... dopamine is being fired out of your brain, like ad nauseum. Dopamine is being shot out in your brain, and it's time for you to get happy. And then your brain... on the chemical receiving end of that, blocks the dopamine. It just blocks it completely. Are you going to get happy? No. All the dopamine is being produced, but you're not going to get happy. The things that make you happy, they're going to go away. This is an issue that leads to depression for some people, if memory serves, where like the brain just can't receive the dopamine, the feeling of like you just can't get happy, you can't lift yourself up out of that depression because the happy drug literally just can't be accessed. Read my audio said, "Sirs, I was promised caramel dancing on the next stream. I thought you were promised caramel dancing on my next video game live stream. I could be wrong. Also, I'm not going to do caramel dancing on this stream only because it's a copyrighted song and it's YouTube, and YouTube's worried about that. But I will do that on my next video game live stream, and you can hold me to that. Read my audio. So, that's the first thing, is understanding how these things work. So puberty blockers, what do puberty blockers do? Well, they don't stop the estrogen and the testosterone from firing. They don't destroy the chemical firing mechanisms. They don't destroy the receptors either. They just block them. They block off access. So, what's the end result of this? Well, the child doesn't actually experience puberty in the way that we normally do. They still grow up to full size and all that other fun stuff. All that still happens. There's a marginal, and I mean like incredibly marginal, like calcium supplements can fix this marginal, change in bone density. So, there's a small change that happens here, but again, that change is not, it's not like puberty blockers suddenly make your child have osteoporosis. It's not that freaking extreme. But when it comes to puberty blockers, the child simply will not experience puberty except for that one side effect that I know of. That's the only one that I've been able to find in my research for them. Now, what happens when the child is taken off these puberty blockers? Let's say, hypothetical example, your child is 12 years old, or not 12, like 8, 9. They're coming up to the point where they might be experiencing puberty, but they let their parents know, hey, Mom, I know that, like, I've got the junk down there to be what you would call a male, but, like, I don't feel like a guy. I feel like a girl. Like, I look in the mirror, and I don't see a guy. I see a girl, and it upsets me. It gets under my skin. I don't know what to do. So the parent sends the kid to a psychiatrist. In the UK, this would be like the NHS would take care of this. And they determine whether or not dysphoria is there, or they could even do a few tests to determine if the child is intersex. This can also play into that. And they'll determine whether or not puberty blockers are a good notion. Now, why puberty blockers? Well, because puberty blockers will buy time. That is what they do. As an example, one of the reasons why this is important, and also we just got a following on Twitch. Awesome. Okay, so why is this important? So, if you're trans in the audience, and I have a very high proportion of trans viewers, so I'd imagine that I have at least 1 or 2 people in my audience right now who are trans. If you are trans and you've already undergone puberty, then you already know that it is that much more difficult for HRT to reverse that. And it is even harder if you are male to female, because male to female trans is notoriously harder to undergo than female to male trans if the end goal is to pass, because a female to male trans can be done very easily without without surgery or anything like that, and go fairly smoothly. You still will not have the parts down there, but not everybody needs that. Not everybody even wants that. I know a lot of my friends who are trans that still have the genitalia they had at birth, and they don't want to change that. They don't want to fundamentally change that part about themselves. They only care about their looks, how they feel when they look in the mirror, if that dysphoria goes away. Female to male trans can pass super easily in most cases. Male to female trans is notoriously harder to pass, because there are some things that happen during the puberty process for males that, if not blocked with the puberty blockers, are harder to reverse later on down the road with HRT. And it sucks that this is the case. I wish this wasn't the case, but that is the case that trans people have to deal with. All of my friends who are trans, I have friends who are female to male, and I have friends that are male to female. And in all these instances, this seems to be about the information that I've gotten from them in any of these conversations. So, given that, it would seem to me that the most ethical decision when we're dealing with a child that may be trans is, instead of making them deal with increased dysphoria because it's harder for them to actually transition, instead giving them puberty blockers that have marginal, if any, side effects, because again, the bone density thing is very, very small. It seems to be more ethical to use blockers, which are completely reversible. And you know how you reverse the blockers? You stop taking them. If you are 20 years old and you stop taking puberty blockers, like if you decide, let's say at 8 or 9, you're sitting there going, hey, I might be trans, I don't know, and then you start taking puberty blockers, and then 6 years down the road, you go, actually, no, I'm cis. I've got it now. I've had some time to consider. My body's been doing its thing. I'm okay. I've got it. I'm cool in my body. And then you stop taking the puberty blockers. You start going through puberty then. And then you'll continue on as you were. Seems to be perfectly fine to me. Doesn't seem to cause any problems. So, again, I don't see how puberty blockers are unethical. I don't. They're completely reversible. The damage is minimal. The damage isn't any higher than any other standard over-the-counter medication. An argument against puberty blockers is an argument against any type of medication that happens to have some side effects. And I'm sorry, I don't want to have that conversation, because that conversation leads down like the anti-vax route really quickly, where you start justifying like, oh well, should you take this headache medication to stop your migraine when it will do your blood a heckin' thin? I'm like, yeah, side effects happen with medications. This is normal. It's the reality of having medications. Ben Will, you can say that you don't believe that, but that's what the studies for puberty blockers do show that. Because the firing mechanism... So, as an example, let me make this really, really abundantly clear. Ben Will in the chat. When you're going through puberty, it's your body's response to an increased amount of testosterone or increased amount of estrogen. So, let me ask you a question. When you hit, let's say, an arbitrary age, 25 years old, has your body stopped producing testosterone or estrogen? Like, for me, my body hasn't stopped producing testosterone. It hasn't, and it's not going to. That's the nature of being an adult. It's not going to stop producing that. When you take the puberty blockers... So when you take the puberty blockers off, and the receptors are now able to receive that testosterone again, you start gaining the benefits, or, for some people can be considered the negative effects, but you start receiving the effects of that testosterone. And you will undergo the puberty process at that point. Typically, we only have people on puberty blockers for like 5 to 8 years at maximum. Usually it's 3 to 5. So, and when you go through HRT, you experience puberty differently. We can put somebody on HRT at age 40, which is when the development is already done. And at age 40, the HRT can actually start allowing you to have the puberty process of the other sex. Because we're introducing more of the other hormone. Chris Robert says, I'm a biologist. Your body only enters puberty in that time of your life. Then why... Okay, so, again, this is what I've seen for the studies for puberty blockers. I'm just relaying what I have seen. And again, with puberty blockers, we only really use them for 3 to 5 years or 8 years in, like, really, really iffy circumstances. So the body's still going to undergo puberty, just later. There's not a magical window where your body has to have puberty. So... Again, we can have that conversation another point if you want, and that's fine. But, regardless, continuing with Steven Crowder.
So sorry, I now know better, and I will be more thoughtful in the future. By that I mean guaranteeing the moral high ground to the opinion that all children should make permanent sexual decisions at the age of 3. And that's why I have no tolerance for people who apologize on these issues.
Okay, so we already have another problem with Steven Crowder. There are no permanent sexual decisions being made at age of 3. There are none. If a parent is making a permanent sexual decision at this point, it is incredibly rare, and I would say abusive. But I would also say that in 99.999 repeating instances, this is not a thing that's happening.
Issues anymore. Really, have we talked about this? We talked about it on Ash Wednesday. If people want to stay in the closet, you don't want to come out as conservative, that's fine. I understand to keep your head down, but do not apologize when you have done nothing wrong. And listen, your view hasn't changed, Mario Lopez.
No,
let's
not
be
at
honest
all.
here. You didn't have a change of heart. You're just afraid, and it's only going to get worse because you apologize. I'm done with this guy. In other transgender news, just to get to this, we're getting to the pedophilia thing.
Before we get to that, so the mere fact that a public figure has not changed their stance on something, but is willing to accept the fact that as a public figure, they have to curtail their speech, as is the nature of being a public figure, that in and of itself is fine. If there's a public figure who's a bigot and you can't change their mind because they're a bigot, that's okay. To think that you can change the mind of every person in the world is to commit the fallacy of change. However, we can let people know that there are repercussions to certain behaviors, like flippant speech as a public figure, that are important to curtail, because there's damage that comes from it. One person being a bigot doesn't cause damage. One person spreading their bigotry does cause damage, and they can spread it either through words or through violence. And in either case, that is where the damage is. Also, effects of puberty blockers. Research indicates that puberty suppression leads to improved psychological well-being in adolescents and young adults with gender dysphoria and can reduce the need for future surgeries if a person decides to transition as an adult. The potential risks of suppression in youth may include adverse effects on bone mineralization and compromised fertility. Research on the long-term effects of brain development are also currently limited, but a 2015 study published in Psychoneurochronology observed an executive functioning in 20 transgender youths treated with puberty blockers compared to untreated and found that there was no difference in performance. So again, the only negative effect that we have really been able to find, for the most part, is the bone mineralization one. The bone density generally gets a little lower at that point. Compromised fertility is something that everybody in the world has to deal with at some point or another, either through menopause or through the fact that you may just be infertile. It sucks, but it is the nature of being human. And again, people are not meant to birth. If you choose to have birth, then cool, excellent, awesome. You're propagating the human race, and I have a margin of respect for that. But it is not your purpose in life to just give birth. I would rather somebody be comfortable in their own skin than be told, well, you can't be comfortable in your own skin because one day you might want to have a kid. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I am not. So yeah, while I was looking through there, I decided to do a little quick research on that while I was listening to Crowder. Jesse Bear says, as a mom, I'll do anything to keep my kids alive. There we are. There we are. Also, I see that there's a conversation happening. You can hold a puberty. This is not common ground. Go through second. I'm looking through the chat real quick between Tony Designs, Kadama, and a few others in there. All right. That said, continuing on with Crowder's inanity.
Yaniv, right? This is the person.
Yeah.
And there's something that a lot of people don't know here, but let's go to the clip first. This is the person, for people who don't know, Marley was dead to begin with, suing places, estheticians, for not waxing Z's balls.
Oh.
Okay, so first of all, let's get into the important part. Jessica Yaniv, from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but Jessica Yaniv, as far as I have been led to believe, has the pronouns she, her, correct? Like, this is from what I understand, this is the case. So making up the Z thing has nothing to do with anything. That's just Crowder trying to make fun of neopronouns. And don't get me wrong, there's an argument against neopronouns. There is an argument against neopronouns and whether or not they have use, because common parlance is determined by ubiquity. There's an argument there. But the end result of that argument is to go, okay, well, then what pronoun do you prefer? And then you just work with that pronoun. Whatever pronoun somebody gives me is the one I'm going to work with. I don't personally care. I may have arguments against ubiquity, but past that point, I'm never going to tell somebody that I will not use their pronoun because I don't think it's useful. I think that's a stupid argument. Whatever pronoun somebody tells me that they have is the pronoun that I will use. And this is why I actually have a video, earlier video on my channel, called This Video is Definitely About Pokemon, where I point out that it's really awkward that people can grow up playing Pokemon, and when a Bulbasaur turns into an Ivysaur, it's very easy for them to call the Bulbasaur Ivysaur for the rest of its life until it evolves again. But somehow, if your friend Tim transitions and says that their name is Martha, you have trouble with that. That's a really awkward bit of cognitive dissonance that has gotten under my skin in the last few years, because I grew up in the Pokemon generation where these things came really easy, and it seems like all the principles apply. Skylar says, neopronouns would be more useful if my fellow NBs could all agree on a smaller set of them. There are so many and people are intimidated by that. Yeah. Mystical Mind says, do puberty blockers prevent the hormones from being generated, or do they just prevent the body from receiving them while still being generated? They just prevent receiving. Puberty blockers just, like how if dopamine is being fired and the receptor can't grab, from what I understand, puberty blockers stop the receptor mechanism, but they still are produced in the body. They still get produced. Just all the receptors for them are just out. NB is just for non-binaries. Yeah, they bind the receptor. So, now, dealing with Jessica Yaniv, there are a few things that I want to get into real quick with Jessica Yaniv. And there are these. From what I have read, going through the tweets from Jessica Yaniv, because Vosh did a video on this and did a very comprehensive breakdown of the tweets for Jessica Yaniv, and there are some things that Vosh said in the video that I don't agree with, but I think that he's mostly had conversations on those later. I don't know his position on them is now, but at some point I may have that conversation with him. I don't know. Not my place. However, there are a few things that came up during this, and that is Jessica Yaniv's tweet history. And based on her tweet history, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I think... said, correct, Cirrus. 1 second. What's going on in here? Biologist, what to do for my job. I'm telling you from a scientist. Puberty causes a lot of problems. One of them is fast twitch fiber. Okay, Chris Prophet, then have that conversation with Kadama or somebody who has studied this as well. And Mystic Mind now says that if they aren't received, it's literally just the puberty doesn't happen when it's supposed to, but there's not like a magic window for it. Like I said earlier, I have 2 transgender friends. I keep forgetting, but I knew first transitioned. Okay. Was Shannon in there? Oh, yeah. Shannon says, oh, fuck, it's Yaniv. You know, so my opinions on Yaniv are such. I think that Yaniv is a dangerous individual. I cannot stand this person. This person actually stands as an antithesis to things that I fight for. So, for instance, you know the NIFB that had the stereotype that like all people that are LGBTQ are all child predators? That's a position that the NIFB have. They cannot see a distinction between a child predator and somebody who's GRSM, LGBTQ, whichever acronym you prefer to adhere to. They have no problem making no distinction between the two. And Jessica Yaniv, from what I have seen in their tweets, seems to me to be very close to that paradigm. I would view Jessica Yaniv as kind of dangerous because there are tweets from Jessica Yaniv that say things like, oh, what if like basically obsessing over what if a 12-year-old girl were to ask about like their period, and then she's like, well, what if I gave them one of my tampons? And my question there is, well, you haven't had bottom surgery. What is the point of you having tampons? I don't get that. I don't understand that. She's also done things like wanting to have a topless party where the only adult allowed is her, and all of the other children should be around, should be female, and should be topless, and they should be children. That's a problem. That is a fucking problem. So, already this is an individual who I view as dangerous due to their behavior. As a result of that behavior, that is how my opinion was formed. There are other things that I have an issue with, like her saying that waxers that are only trained in dealing with female body parts, she tries to sue them for not taking care of her body parts that have not been transitioned. So she still has penis and balls, and those are things that a waxer, if they are only trained in dealing with the other set of parts, that waxer is not going to be able to handle that very easily. They don't have the knowledge to do so. It's like asking a heart surgeon to perform brain surgery real quick. It's out of their purview. Yeah, all the same things apply. In these situations, you're still taking a scalpel, you're still cutting into the person, you're still trying to save their life by working with a muscular organ, but the heart surgeon is not a neurosurgeon. The waxer that is trained in both may be comfortable doing that, but if a waxer is not trained in both, then forcing them to try to do that, again, is like trying to ask a heart surgeon to perform brain surgery real quick. You're asking somebody to do something out of your purview. That is something that Jessica Yaniv not only requests, but then sues people for not doing. And Shannon Q has mentioned in the chat that there's also racism against immigrants from Jessica. I'm not certain on that one because I haven't heard that. I hadn't heard that until Shannon mentioned it, so I just want to point out there that I do trust Shannon, and I do trust Shannon's judgment. That is a thing that she has said. So I'm willing to say, okay, that is a thing that Shannon has said, and it sounds to align with the ideology that I've seen from Jessica, but at the same time, I have not seen evidence of it myself, so please take that with a grain of salt. But I do see Shannon as very trustworthy on this. It's 100% watch the Blair White stream, then I will have to watch the Blair White stream. I will have to watch that and go through that myself. So anyway, I wanted to get all that out of the way, not to poison the well, but to point out that when it comes to Jessica Yaniv, I view this individual as a problem. This is not a defense of Jessica Yaniv. This is a defense of trans people, whom Jessica does not represent. Not represent well in any shape or form.
And what if she did that, and then a dude, a man comes in and says he's a woman, and then he wants my wife to polish his Johnson?
Oh my God. So the first thing I want to comment on is before anything even happened, there was the artificial, fear from the Steven Crowder group, it is a woman who looks slightly more like a man than we are comfortable with. It's a funny joke, guys. We have 4 million subscribers, and we're trying to make them laugh because being a transphobe is hilarious. Not passing is a joke. No. I don't find that as a terribly convincing way to comport yourself. I don't. So yeah, no. The little joke to his audience at Jessica's expense for not passing in a way that they expect. I don't think that that's a very good way to go about this. There are things to rail against Jessica on. Passing is not one of them.
In this day and age, with the BC Human Rights Code and the Canadian Human Rights Code, if someone identifies as a woman, they have to receive those gender-affirming care services.
Okay, no. Incorrect. That is not how that works. Okay, so, first of all, receiving a waxing is not a gender-affirming care service. That's not what it is. It's a luxury service. If, as an example, if you are a cis woman and you go to a Brazilian waxer and you say, I would like to get my genitalia waxed, I would like it to be nice and smooth. And during that, you sexually harass the person who is touching your genitals because they have to, because that's part of it. The same thing applies to your gynecologist. If you were to sexually harass your gynecologist, or you were to sexually harass your spa technician, they do not have to provide you that service anymore. You've now done something that is outside of that. So you're not entitled to these things by merit of existing. I want to get that out of the way right now. Second thing is when you are saying that, because it is a human right for me to have a Brazilian wax. No, the fuck it's not. That is not how that works. At all. So I have plenty of issues with the way this argument is being phrased. It's being phrased in such a way so that Jessica can pretend that she has a moral high ground to stand on, but she doesn't at all.
That's the law.
I didn't understand a word that gentleman was saying. Was that
Okay, so first of all, not a gentleman. There are thousands of things to rail against Jessica. Gender identity is not one of them. At all. Just want to throw that out. If you are a person who hates Jessica and everything that she stands for, cool! 90% of the things that this person does and stands to represent are things that I cannot fucking stand. Being predatory towards children, that is something that I cannot stand. That immediately raises red flags to me. Being a racist, something that I cannot fucking stand. And if Shannon and the Blair conversation are to be believed, then that is something that is within her paradigm. I can't stand that. being predatory to small businesses and suing them because you think that your usage of them is a human right, that, again, I have a problem with, because you are harassing them at that point, where this is concerned. Because you're asking them to do something that they are not trained to do, and saying that, well, it's a human right. It's like saying, again, I'm going to go to the neurosurgeon and the cardiac surgeon. Again, you do not tell your cardiac surgeon it's my human right to receive this brain surgery, even if it's true. Even if it's true that it's your human right to receive that brain surgery right there. Because if we're dealing with medical procedures like that, I think that medical procedures are human rights, personally. You can disagree with me. That's fine. A lot of people disagree with me. We can have that conversation later. But because I'm of the opinion that medical procedures like that are human rights, you still don't tell your heart surgeon that they have to perform brain surgery on you because that is a human right that you require. So even granting that it's a human right, it still doesn't work. It does not. So, again, there are things to be mad at Jessica about. There are things to hate what she stands for. Gender identity isn't one of them. You can say that she's a bad example for the trans community, the same way that I view that Blair White is a bad example for the trans community. That's fine, but that does not invalidate the person being trans. It doesn't. Like, if somebody like Nicholas Fuentes were to tell me tomorrow, he probably would, that because I don't rail against brown people, I'm a traitor to the white race, that doesn't stop making me white at that point. That's not how things work. Douchey thing to from Snake Man 448. Douchey thing to deliberately misgender people. Yeah. Agreed. My identity, your identity is not something for me to assign to you. That's yours. I have to use it as a method of being social with you.
Plump and whiteface?
It's just Eddie Murphy under all of it.
Oh, and there's one thing that I could that I want to respond to real quick. Second Son says, "Is Blair as bad as Jessica to you, Cyrus?" It's hard for me to categorize them as bad as the other, because the things that Blair stands for are things that I'm ideologically opposed to. I think that, like, by merit of Blair White being a trans medicalist and, like, judging other trans people on whether or not they pass, I find that as being, like, notoriously a notorious issue with her, and I find that to be, like, a little abusive to other trans people because they didn't have the ability to go through what she did. There was a whole thing, and I know that she apologized for it, but I want to bring it up because it's pertinent to here. There was a whole thing with Blair White and Riley Dennis where, because Riley Dennis didn't pass enough to Blair White standards, then Blair White got onto Riley Dennis saying that she wasn't really trans and, like, broke this person down repeatedly because Blair didn't think they were doing enough to pass. And some people don't have the money to do that. Some people don't have the ability to do it. Some people, like in the case of people who have not been able to go on puberty blockers, sometimes simply their bodies, even after transitioning, just will not gain what they consider to be a female passing form. These are the realities that trans people have to go through, and it's not up to Blair fucking White to determine whether or not these people are deserving of their identities because of that. Now, again, she did apologize for that, but it doesn't invalidate what she did. Now, do I find something like that to be as problematic as the things that Jessica's doing? No. Because what she's doing is incredibly bad, and it's incredibly bad for trans people because she is hurting other trans people by what she's doing. With Jessica, though, I'm seeing Jessica as, like, actually dangerous on top of the damage that she does to the trans community. Because, like, I don't have a reason to not trust Blair White around kids. If I happen to have a child and the only person that was around to take care of them for a few hours when I went to the water park was Blair White, I wouldn't be scared to give my child to Blair White based on what I know about Blair. I could be ideologically opposed to literally everything she stands for, but I don't think that she's a danger to kids. Jessica, on the other hand, I would be absolutely terrified.
No, that was Ursula.
Listen, not even, yeah, exactly. Not even making an effort there.
This person even testified at a British...
Not even making an effort. Okay, again, getting into the whole trans thing. Getting upset at somebody for not being trans enough. That doesn't add anything to the conversation. It just lets us all know that you're a shitty person. But it's Steven Crowder, so we already knew that going in.
Columbia Human Rights Tribunal.
Really?
By the way, same kind of Human Rights Tribunal that had Mike Ward, right? They wanted to fine him for a joke.
That doesn't matter. Okay, so fining somebody for a joke. We can find this as a problem. We can see this as an issue, and I get that. But can I ask something to the audience here? If I say a statement and then I say it's a joke, does it somehow invalidate that I said the statement? Did the statement now magically go away? You know what? I'm actually gonna show that comment for fun. So the mere fact that I have said that X statement is a joke, it doesn't make that statement go away. If I caused any damage with that statement, saying it's a joke did not make that damage go away. And in fact, we see this in children, where children will like say something incredibly hurtful and then say it's a joke right afterwards, as a method of trying to erase damage that they may or may not have done to somebody.
Oh.
And the story dominated the culture war while we were gone, with even the Prime Minister actually a press conference, in case you missed it. Yeah.
No, it's important I clarify transphobia.
All right, and we begin with this. I'm gonna go ahead and go out on a limb and say that this little thing, this little skit is yikesy, but it's Steven Crowder, and that's yikesy skits are kind of the thing that he does. But let's continue.
Has no home in Canada, and this beautiful and brave woman, she deserves the same dignity and basic human rights as all women, including that of having her beautiful scrotum and testicles waxed without fear of shame.
I was told there would be a big check.
And as Canada's chief executive, let me offer Jessica our sincerest apologies. And as a symbolic show of unity, allow...
So the first issue that I have here is trying to argue that the only reason that she's doing this is for money. I don't know if that's the case. I find that there's a lot of things that I have an issue with when it comes to Jessica. I don't know if this is a thing that she's doing just for money. So I don't see the purpose of that one in there.
Allow me to now perform the original services you were so rudely denied.
Mr. Prime Minister, I was told there would be a...
No, Jessica. There's no need to accept a consolation prize here.
Actually, my lawyer and I, we discussed them.
Hey.
Please.
The most important things in life cannot be bought or sold, like the dignity of which you were robbed, on which I could place no money.
See, I get that this is supposed to be funny, and I get that, like, the dignity that you were stripped of while also doing something in public, which is a method of stripping somebody of the dignity. Like, I get how that can be considered a joke. I just don't find it funny.
Monetary value.
Well, actually, we agreed upon it.
And so there's no sense in trying.
Please don't touch me. All right. Get the hell off me.
Yeah.
Wait, did Steven just, like, theatrically cringe to his own joke that he wrote and performed? Okay. Dragon Master, how was that funny? It's funny in construction, but it's not funny in execution. So constructing a joke, like let's say I'm constructing a hypothetical joke, and in this hypothetical joke, I say that the biggest problem is that you were robbed of dignity, and then directly afterwards, I do something that is a method of robbing of dignity. This is a joke construction technique that even the Looney Tunes uses when it comes to like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck. Robbing a character of dignity after saying that they were required dignity, this is a thing that happens in old cartoons all the time. It's a standard method of humor. It's execution that is the problem. In something like Looney Tunes, when a character is said to have dignity and then it is taken away and stripped away, like Elmer Fudd, for instance, this happens to him all the time, where like his shorts will be stripped down after he's made a play about saying like he deserves respect or something like that. This is a standard joke construction formula. In something like Looney Tunes, it's easy to look at that and say, yeah, that's poking fun, that's perfectly fine, because it's being well executed. But when you're dealing with the way that Steven Crowder's doing it, there's definitely malicious intent. And Dragon Master says it was rhetorical. I'm sorry. I can't tell tone from the chat. I can't. Sorry about that. I see stuff like that, and I'm like, I need to respond to it. Obviously, though, at that point, that was the case. I'm sorry.
Well, you know what? That's
Stop touching me, man.
By the way, something that people haven't necessarily talked about yet,
painful
that
thing anyway.
Jessica also under fire for trying to throw a semi-nude kids pool party where parents weren't allowed. The ball's on this broad, and we're going to get back to that.
Yeah, and that's another issue that I brought up earlier that I can't stand at all. The semi-nude kids pool party, like, immediately screamed Predator to me.
later, by the way. It's unsurprising to me. It's completely inevitable because by its very nature, it's sexualizing children. This is a sexual decision. This involves we talk about reproductive rights. What about the reproductive rights of children?
Yeah.
I've dealt with biblical gender roles, right? And biblical gender roles had I'm not saying this is Crowder's argument. I am saying phrasing. Remember the biblical gender roles argument for why children, as soon as they hit puberty, should be able to have sex and should be able to bear children? Remember that? You remember that argument? Remember that was a real thing spoken by a real person?
This involves we talk about reproductive rights. What about the reproductive rights of children?
Yeah.
Stephen Crowder, biblical gender roles fan confirmed. Like, I see that, and I'm immediately... I immediately have issue because I've dealt with BGR. So, like, as much as I want to say I know what he's meaning, I've dealt with BGR, so I know that there are people who legitimately think that, like, a 12-year-old not being able to have sex and have a child immediately as soon as puberty happens is, like, a violation of God's law. Because I've dealt with people like that, it's hard for me to take this with charity.
Shouldn't they have the right to be protected as it relates to their ability to reproduce? We're actually talking about reproductive rights.
Yeah.
Every time they push some gender studies trend, all the focus immediately on children.
Yeah.
Why?
All right, Steven. So you may have that, like, really dumb face right there going, why? Why does it focus on children? Well, here's the why. Here's the why children get brought up in this. Children get brought up in this because a lot of these studies, if an adult were to look at them and an adult is trying to figure this stuff out, they would actually go, oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. Sometimes, not all the time. Crowder is nightmarishly dumb, so he would not notice this. But he would look at those studies and go, oh, maybe there's something to this. However, it's notoriously harder to convince a parent that there is something to this when it comes to their child. So if you tell a parent who may or may not have a trans kid that, hey, if your child does come up to you with information that's, denotes that they may or may not be trans, please watch out for that, you immediately get the defensive reaction from the parent. This is why some of the focus comes to the children, because it's very hard to get parents to understand this. We see this with mental health as well. And we actually saw this a lot when we were trying to normalize being gay. Remember, I brought this up earlier in the stream. How many times have you heard a parent tell a child, or heard stories of a parent telling a child, you're not gay, it's a phase. You don't like women, it's a phase. You don't like men, it's a phase. You're not bi, that's a phase. You just can't understand what you want. You don't know that. That's a thing that happens more often than it should. That's why a lot of the stuff gets centered around there. Also, specifically to the trans issue, and this is one of the reasons why this gets brought up when it comes to medical issues around trans people. When you're dealing with the trans issue, the idea of puberty blockers only function when given to somebody who has not yet had puberty. That's their purpose. Well, not that they only function in that way, but they are best when applied to children that have not experienced puberty so that they can buy time to determine whether or not they are in fact trans. That's really important. And when you deny that importance, you then get to ask questions of like, why does it always center around children? Well, it centers around children because children get discriminated against whenever they think that they may or may not be trans. And as a result, we see people who can't actually transition until well into adulthood, and in a lot of cases end up suffering more dysphoria because it's harder to pass when you are trying to transition into adulthood, or transition as an adult, especially if you are male to female trans, which, like I said earlier in the stream, is notoriously harder. Jack and Quill says, for $5 to the person in the chat saying that she isn't trans just because she's garbage, she still is. We don't have to engage with a no true Scotsman to criticize. True. Again, if I say something that somebody thinks somebody thinks is against like an atheist agenda, it doesn't stop making me an atheist. If somebody thinks that, A real skeptic wouldn't have the view on gender that you do, even though my view on gender was informed by looking at multiple studies to determine what my position is on. And if you don't believe me, please see the Essence of Thought debate on gender that I had with Essence of Thought. My position was informed by looking at those studies and by having conversations with trans people. So if somebody were to say, well, you're not a skeptic because this, no, I still am. That still ends up being part of my identity. You don't get to take that away because the no true Scotsman fallacy exists. So no, I agree with Jack and Quill. This is the reason I refuse to misgender Yaniv. I think Yaniv is a shitty person. I think she's a piece of garbage human being. But it doesn't make her not trans.
And let's review this, and you might think this is kind of a fringe tendency, but they have a long history of sexualizing children, pushing pedophilia. So let's go to a brief history lesson here. 20th century, okay? Many famous academics, they argued in favor of pedophilia. 1977, 3 Frenchmen, they were put on trial, okay, for having sex with kids, young as 13. Number of French intellectuals signed a petition to legalize sex with young children, okay?
Okay. We have more garbage human beings. That doesn't make it a systemic agenda.
This is important because we've talked about gender theory. All of the biggest postmodernist thinkers in France, they signed it. Yeah. Michel Foucault, Jean Sartre, Jacques...
All of them? Every single one? Every single one, Crowder? Are you sure about that? Are you sure? Because if you think that it's every one of them, I would like a citation. And of course, being that this is Steven Crowder's channel, we have none. We have none. This is just how this works. This is Steven Crowder. Fact-checking Steven Crowder is always hard because he doesn't fucking provide sources.
I think was it Jacques Derrida? Jean-François Lyotard is his actual name. Simone de Beauvoir. We've talked about Simone de Beauvoir. The list goes on. The crazy thing is, by the way, the age of consent in France, right? They decided this was going to be the mantle they would carry.
Yeah.
It was already 15. They wanted to completely abolish.
Pushing it.
And the age of consent is lower in other countries, like in places in Japan where it's 14. What's your point?
Any law...
Also, Cartoon Contrarian for the $5. My progressive MD mother said I was trying to follow a trend when I came out. She now cringes when I bring her faux pas up. Yeah, I get that.
Regarding age. In an interview about this petition, Foucault said, I want to quote him directly, to assume that a child is incapable of explaining what happened and was incapable of giving his consent are 2 abuses that are intolerable, quite unacceptable. So he...
And I disagree with that. Okay, so, actually, I might not disagree with that statement completely for one reason. I think that when it comes to sex, consent is not actually all that's required. Let me say that right now, and before everybody in the chat starts dogpiling me, my position is that informed consent is required. Informed consent. Because if you have no idea what you're getting into, but you just say, yes, I'm okay with that, that's still not informed consent. That's just consent, which you may or may not have even understood what the implications are. And because of that, this is why we've got laws in the United States about whether we have laws that determine whether or not children are actually to be held accountable for when they write down, when they sign contracts. It's very hard to hold a lot of children to contracts because you can consent to the contract, but whether or not we can consider something informed consent is a problem. Also, we have Ultimate Blaze 23. Cyrus, you're wrong. Would you like to explain to me, Ultimate Blaze 23, why I'm wrong? Please. I'll wait. Because if you just want to make the statement by itself, Cyrus, you're wrong, I would like to know what I'm wrong on. I would like to know why I'm wrong. And I would like to know where your opinion is coming from. What is the basis you're going on? What axioms you're working with? Would like to know these things. And while we're trying to figure out these things, and if I missed their comment in the chat, let me know. But I don't know if they're actually going to say anything on that. Typically what happens. Could be wrong, though. Continuing on with Crowder.
He thinks It's abuse to not allow kids to have sex. Keep in mind, Foucault is still, to this day, the most cited author in all of the humanities studies across colleges.
Okay, cool. Let me use Steven Crowder's argument for another figure who is incredibly important to history. Okay? Let me do that. All right, Crowder? Let's take Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, for his time, was very progressive, but for our time, was a blatant fucking racist. Yes, he did a lot when it came to the emancipation. But for our time period, he would be considered a blatant fucking racist. I guess because of that one thing, we can disregard anything he did, any good he has done, all of it. Gone. There we are. Cool. That's what we do. We look at this and immediately go, oh, well, there's one thing this person didn't like. Canceled. Abraham Lincoln was a racist. Canceled. Corgi Cookies, Abraham Lincoln was a racist. Yes. Abraham Lincoln was, for his time, very progressive, but in our time would have been viewed as almost a white supremacist. So Abraham Lincoln did not believe that slavery was morally wrong, for one. There's our first bit. History Channel.
Lincoln sits
Why?
in the new
I hate that History Channel has freaking things that pop up when you're trying to watch. But Lincoln also believed that black people did not deserve to have the same rights as white people. Lincoln argued that the Founding Fathers' phrase, all men are created equal, he said that applied for black and whites a lot. He didn't think that they should have the same social and political rights. His views became clear during an 1858 series of debates when his opponent in Illinois for U.S. Senate, Stephen Douglas, accused him of supporting Negro equality. In their fourth debate at Charleston, Illinois, Lincoln made his position clear. And I quote, I will say that I am not, nor have I ever been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. He began by going on to say that he opposed blacks having the right to vote, to serve on juries, and to hold office in the intermarry with white people. What he did believe was that black people, like all men, had the right to improve their condition in society and to enjoy the fruits of their labor. In this way, they were equal to white men, and for this reason, slavery was unjust to him, but he did not consider it a moral wrong. That is why, for his time, he was considered progressive, but for our time, he would be a blatant fucking racist and a white supremacist. So, and because of that, if we were to take Steven Crowder's argument, we could dismiss anything Abraham Lincoln had ever done that was good. Except that's not how things work. That's not how these things function. And because that's not how things work in the real world, which Steven Crowder exists as a part of while also denying, then that's an issue. Also, Goddess Love says that there was nothing wrong with racism then. Black people who were bought over America lived better than they would have in Africa. Get the fuck out. If there was nothing wrong with racism then under what axiom did you determine that there was nothing wrong with racism? Racism? Wow. Yeah, please, what underlying axiom are you using to justify the statement there was nothing wrong with racism then? Please? I'm waiting. I didn't get a response from the other guy as far as I could tell. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I'll wait. And I'll wait by watching more of Crowder.
Oh. He's thought of as the father, the godfather of gender theory itself. Simone de Beauvoir, we just talked about Simone de Beauvoir, a French existentialist. She's the first person to claim that gender was a social construct, serves as the bedrock for modern gender theory.
Oh boy, I'm starting to see a trend.
Is that... Cannot see anything on the person who he is mentioning. Awkward. They probably got surprised that you called them out on it and ran and hid. I do look at the chat. I just can't see it all. I just can't see it all the time as fast as I need to.
Trend here.
So these were the theorists.
Okay, so again, all right. So let's do a thing. Let's. God, that's right. I have merch that says "Let's do a thing" now. Anyway, let's do a thing real quick. So again, if I were to say that because X individual did 1 bad action, 2 bad actions, 15 bad actions, 1,000 bad actions, does it invalidate the 1 good thing they did? Well, no. It may over-encompass it, but it doesn't make the 1 good thing they did go away. I'm willing to say 1,500 bad things to 1 good thing, because if your argument can't survive a reductio ad absurdum, it's a bad fucking argument. Guess what? Your argument doesn't survive the reductio ad absurdum. It's a bad fucking argument. That is the purpose of the reductio. The reductio posits an incredibly hypothetical situation where we put something in the worst possible scenario, we over-exaggerate it, we put it to its extreme, and if in its most extreme form it can't pass the goddamn reductio, then it can't fucking pass in any of the versions of the argument that are softer than it. It's a hyper-steel man. God is Love actually did respond. Interesting. You think they'd have a better life in Africa in the long term, although slavery is bad, it turns out. Okay, cool. So you're referring to people over time. It seems like the axiom that you are working with is consequentialism. The consequence of slavery in the long term being that people got to grow up in America, and America is marginally better than Africa, according to you. Then by that, you get to say that it was okay for their ancestors to be persecuted. I don't buy that. I don't buy that as an argument. Because, is it possible, just throw that out there, is it possible that an immigration could have happened for a country that got here via slavery? Would it be possible for that family to have immigrated here at any point, and then the same exact fucking people born in this country come to this country? That's a thing that could happen, right? You don't even have to respond to that. We know that that's fucking the case. If that wasn't the case, then immigration wouldn't happen to this country at all. If we agree that people can come to this country via other means than slavery, then the position that slavery am good because it brought people to this country is absolutely fucking bad. So, again, if you want to be wrong, that's fine. I have no problem with you being wrong in my chat. But if you're going to be wrong, you will be corrected, and I'm okay with doing that.
That's right. This is important to note. The theorists, the philosophers. And did you learn in college the John Money study? Did you learn? This was the guy who had twins, and he raised one as a boy, one as a girl?
I know the study now, but I did not know
This is important because this, again, everything you know about transgenderism, you say, well, why does it always push to pedophilia? Well, here's why.
Sorry.
Okay, continue, Crowder.
You have the philosophers, the theory, who established it. By the way, they still believe there were only 2 genders. They didn't believe that there were 57 like on your Facebook profile.
Yeah,
but
oh, wait, I know what's going to
we're
happen.
only so crazy.
Hey,
then there was
72 genders.
Then there was in practice.
Well, actually, okay, so does everybody here understand what a bimodal model is? Does everybody here understand what a bimodal model is? Like a bimodal model for gender, right? Does everybody okay, so bimodal as opposed to a spectrum. All right. So in a spectrum model, we would say that, oh, your gender could be anywhere on the spectrum. It could be male, it could be female, it could be anything. It could be anything anywhere on that spectrum at all. Bimodal, on the other hand, denotes that there are 2 extremes that are prominent, and we do see that male and female are prominent. Most trans people find themselves going from male to female or female to male. However, does that mean that non-binary people don't exist? Absolutely fucking not. That means this is the reason the bimodal model is important. With the bimodal model, you have the 2 extremes accounted for. You recognize these 2 extremes are most prominently represented, but you also recognize that there is a percentage of people that happen to be in between those 2 bimodal extremes. This is the reason we don't use a binary model. A binary model said bimodal is not opposed to a spectrum. It's a statistical distribution that makes sense along a spectrum. Well, yes, a bimodal construction allows a spectrum to have context. So a spectrum, if I say gender is a spectrum by itself, then we get the whole, like, well, how many genders are there? That argument. But when you say gender is bimodal, That includes the spectrum in there. So you're right. It's opposed to a spectrum in construction, but not opposed to a spectrum in execution. So, being normal is an extreme. Woo, big fucking gay. Look, Bandito, obviously you're not very good at English, and that's fine. I'm okay with you not being good at English. I would ask that you go get an education. I would do that. Or at the very least read like 1 or 2 books. That will help. But, continuing on. So, the reason that I call these things extremes, you have on the extreme, let's say on the extreme left side, you've got masculine, on the extreme right side, you've got feminine, and the bimodal model does have a spectrum in between of possibilities that are in there. These basically just end up being various levels of NB. Not necessarily. There's other stuff in there as well. There are people who assign neopronouns to these, which would be considered arbitrary labels. However, male and female are also arbitrary labels. But I do think that constructing these things as a bimodal structure works infinitely better than any type of argument that says that, oh, it's just a spectrum. No, it's not just a spectrum. It is a spectrum along a bimodal scale. A bimodal scale accounts for the representation of the variables much better than anything else. If you happen to go with the argument that it's just binary, you ignore the fact that things exist within that bimodal scale. And whenever somebody says, well, gender's not a social construct because scientific XYZ, then you realize they're actually having a false equivalence. They're talking about sex, not gender.
Practice the case study. We wouldn't call it a clinical trial, but you've learned about this in college. This is John Money. He was the one who had twins, right? He raised one as a boy, one as a girl to...
Also, Sinvia, what is your opinion on trans species, humans who believe they are wolves, etc.? Category error. It's categorically different. My opinion on that has nothing to do with my opinion on people who are transgender.
Prove that gender was arbitrary. We've already covered this. One of the twins, who was, I can't remember the one that was raised as a girl, I think, committed suicide.
Yes. Yeah.
The other one did not, to be fair.
Okay, so he's talking about David Reamer. This is the David Reamer case. This is the David Reamer case. For those who are not aware, in the David Reamer case, David Reamer, there was a botched circumcision. And the David Reamer case, I don't like the David Reamer case being used as an example because transphobes and trans advocates alike appeal to the David Reamer case and don't understand jack shit about the David Reamer case and the implications of it. So, first of all, if there's anything that can be pulled from the David Reamer case, it's an argument against forced circumcision. That's it. Because a forced circumcision, a botched circumcision, is what led to the David Reamer case. So Benez Jr. says, can't we have a binary model that accepts the fact that there are some people who don't fall into either binary categories? Yes, that's called a bimodal model. That's what that would be called. That would be a bimodal model. There are various modes, but 2 binaries that happen to be on the extreme right and left. That's how a bimodal model works for this. That's why a bimodal model works for this. Though if you desperately wanted to keep the gender as binary argument, then there's a counter argument of that as well, in that if we assign male to 0 and we assign female to 1, how many numbers exist between 0 and 1? And once you get to the point where you realize you're counting to infinity, we continue from there. But yeah, no, the David Reamer case, if anything, is an argument for banning child genital mutilation at the end of the day. Past that, anyone arguing that the David Reamer case works for the trans argument or against the for transposition or against transposition, we have people who argue both. I think that serves to undermine the functionality of the David Reamer case. It's not a good argumentative tool. Data and statistics are. Data works really well. Anecdote, not as much.
Died of an overdose of antidepressants, and this is still taught in schools as the basis of the modern medical approach to transgenderism. And he had this, John Money, to say about pedophilia. If I were to see the case of a boy aged 10 or 11 who's intensely erotically attracted toward a man in his 20s or 30s, if the relationship is totally mutual and the bonding is genuinely totally mutual, then I would not call it pathological in any way, he said.
Okay, so we need to go ahead and get a definition here for fun. Okay. Pathological. Pathological, relating to pathology. Compulsive, obsessive. Okay. There's nothing in his statement that denoted that something was compulsive or obsessive. Just an attraction. I am attracted to Raz. I am attracted to Emmett. I am attracted to Aaron. I'm not compulsively obsessed with any of them. That would be incredibly unhealthy. Attraction is not pathological. That's fine. However, with that said, is it a problem? Well, yes, because you can't you can have a mutual attraction between the two, but you cannot have informed consent, which means that is not informed mutual attraction. Meaning we can't determine any actions coming from this. The attraction itself, they can have it. It's fine. You can't control that. The actions that come from that, though, we can have problems with. So if somebody says, hey, I'm attracted to a child. Okay, well, that's something that you may want to see a psychiatrist for. That's something you may want to try to get help for. But what are you going to do with that? If you're going to actually go harm somebody, like I'm fairly certain that Jessica Yaniv would be at risk of doing, then that's something that we can address. And that's a problem. That's a really fucking big problem.
That's insane. And he made them, in a point kind of we skipped over, he made them perform sexual acts with each other.
Yes, dominating sexual
kids.
acts.
Yeah, incredible. And
that in and of itself is sexual abuse.
Well, yeah. Forcing a 30-year-old and an 11-year-old to have sex with one another is abusive sexually. I don't think there's any question about that. Yet somehow the left-leaning person on the other end of the monitor here is looking at this and wondering what the fuck this has to do with apparently the left having an agenda of pedophilia. I would like to know.
The poet, Allen Ginsberg, I think we talked about, was deported from Cuba for saying Che Guevara was cute.
Yeah.
Member of NAMBLA.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. He used to say, oh, if you don't like gay marriage, don't get gay married.
Right? Exactly.
But what if I don't like children being subjected to
Here we
societal
are.
pedophilia? Well, then don't be a part of society. I mean, how do you fix that problem?
Okay, so the reason that this doesn't work. Okay, so for this comparison to function, for this comparison to be usable in any way, shape, or form, right? For this to work, then we would have to assume that there is some equivalence between homosexuality and pedophilia as attractions. So, can two homosexual males have informed consent with each other and be happy with that? Absolutely. Now, what are the problems when it comes to pedophilia? Well, one, if you are attracted to somebody and the attraction is pedophilic, the first question becomes, how long would that attraction last? Because by the nature of a human, the nature of humans are to grow up and grow older, then that attraction can only be temporary, as is the nature of the attraction. So there's your first issue. The second one is if you are attracted to somebody who cannot give informed consent, then that relationship shouldn't function at all. If there's no way to determine informed consent, then that relationship has thousands of avenues to be abusive, and there's even an argument for its construction being abusive. This is not the same thing with homosexuality. Homosexuality does not have these same avenues. In a standard homosexual relationship, we would have informed consent between the two adults, and the attraction would only be temporary in the same way that any attraction would be temporary for human beings, in that it can grow, it can fade, it can do any number of things. People fall in and out of love all the time, as opposed to a fundamentally temporary one that would exist in a pedophilia situation. So, there's plenty of problems, and that's not even getting to a lot of the moral issues that come with it. This is just like the base level shit. So, when you are unironically, as Steven Crowder, comparing pedophilia to homosexuality, you are being at best disingenuous, at worst a flaming piece of shit. Actually, that's not the worst. That's probably the middle ground. There's probably something worse than that in here. I'm fairly certain that would be the case. So, but continuing with this dumb argument.
Old. Remember, people are now crucifying Mario Lopez, AC Slater, for saying that a 3-year-old can't decide to change his gender. Well, hold on a second. If a kid can change their gender, why wouldn't they be able to consent to sex? Right. Surely, a sex change is a bigger life decision than just having sex. People only.
Okay, so again, puberty blockers are not a sex change, and puberty blockers is something that Crowder brought up. I brought it up as well for argument's sake. But Steven Crowder has brought up puberty blockers on this as well. It's part of his argument. Puberty blockers, again, not being permanent, are not a bigger life decision than sex, especially in a case if we're dealing with an 11-year-old and a 30-year-old, which is, again, something he brought up as part of his argument. In a case like this, because the sex cannot contain informed consent, we are dealing with a case of rape. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's what we're doing. Sex that does not have consent is rape. And because we can't determine informed consent here, the sex would be rape. That's not just having sex one time. That's called developing trauma. Benitha, can you please tell me the many health risks of puberty blockers? We've already gone over this. I already know you're wrong, but I'm okay with you trying to explain to me the many health risks of puberty blockers. Please. And if you do so, could you actually please cite me the studies that you're using? I would like those as well. If you're going to make an argument for these, I would like you to at least cite your sources. That's very important to me. Here's where we wait for the response. I'm very snarky. Yes, I'm dealing with people who are wrong. I retain the right to be snarky. And think of it this way. So you're on my channel. You are essentially in my home, as it were. This is a space that I have opened up for people to come in so that they can have a conversation. I could just as easily make it where the live chat doesn't exist as a concept. Like, that thing is completely gone. I can disable comment sections. These things are small limitations into my world. So, if you are in here, you will follow all the same rules that you would if you were in my house. And that is, we can have an argument. We can have disagreements. That's fine. We have them all the time in my home. But I retain the right to be a snarky asshole, because that's what I am anyway. I'm not going to change who I am because you happen to maybe have an issue with how I'm using my tone here. Does he know most doctors won't perform sex affirmation surgery until the patient is 18? Doesn't seem like it. $5 from Brittany Morgan. Thank you very much. And I wish this chat would stop scrolling so I could actually get a copy pasta real quick. So what is going on here? So, Jazz Jennings. I'm not actually seeing anything on Jazz Jennings and puberty blockers, because I saw that that was brought up in the chat. Nothing. So let's see. Let's try again. Details about gender surgery. Okay, that has to do with the gender confirmation surgery. That has nothing to do with puberty blockers. Puberty blockers do not necessarily mean that you're going to be trans. Puberty blockers just assist in that if that is what you ultimately decide. So again, puberty blockers have nothing to do with this conversation. Also, it appears that we have not received anything else from the person I was talking to earlier. So, neat. Oh, hold on. I'm not wrong. I saw it on Facebook. Beneath the Glass, I have a question. If I were to randomly show an article from The Onion, right, and I were to post it to Facebook unironically as if it were real, and you saw it, would you be able to make the argument that you're not wrong? Monkeys just stab people for fun because you saw it on The Onion. Is that functionally how this would work? And if you argue yes, I can stop engaging with you right now because I recognize that we're not just dealing with somebody who's uninformed. We're dealing with a moron. Yes, Benitha. But you see that by me, do you see the reason that I use The Onion as my source here? Do you see why I've done that? Because The Onion is a source. It's just a joke one. Facebook, however, is not. Facebook is a portal to sources. So if you're going to say you saw it on Facebook, that means that there was a website that you have not informed me of that was part of you finding this on Facebook. That's like saying I saw something on Google. Google isn't a source. Google is a tool. Google's a portal. So, again, I would like to know your source. Citation. You obviously have a position. You believe you're informed. I would like to know the source of that information. Groups of people on Facebook with first-hand experience. So you are aware that anecdote is not data, right? You are aware of that. You are also aware that people on the internet have the capacity to lie. There's every chance that everything I'm saying on my channel is a lie. That everything I'm saying to you right now is a lie. Because I am a human being and I have the capacity to lie. Now, I try my very best not to, but you don't know if that's the case. I could be lying to you right now, as could everybody on Facebook. So if it's people on Facebook who are anecdotes, not data, who have the capacity to lie, and that's all you're going off of, then you don't have a source. Therefore, you have no justification for your position. You don't have to gain anything from a lie. I will tell a lie right now that I don't gain anything from. I do not have hot sauce on my desk. I do not have a bottle of hot sauce on my desk. That's a lie. I gain nothing from that lie. I still told a lie. You do not have to gain anything for a lie to be constructed. For a lie to gain you something, there has to be some sort of political mechanism behind it. For instance, Russia not lying about us getting on the moon before them. Did they have incentive to lie? Yes, they did, because they were actively fighting us in a space race. But they didn't. It's a great argument against flat earthers. Beith, you gained a bit more ego from that lie. Look, I already have all the ego in the world that I need. I didn't gain any ego from that lie. I didn't. But I'm willing to accept gained ego from lie as an argument, because since you've opened up that avenue, you have opened up the avenue that anyone on Facebook who told that lie and got a single like, hold on, anybody on Facebook who told that lie and got a single like at all, of any kind, any confirmation, was something that raised their ego. Ergo, per your argument, the way you have decided to construct this, the way you brought this up, with the methods you used, these people have incentive to lie, which means that you, in saying they had nothing to gain, through the methods you told me I'm utilizing, have now constructed a lie. Do not dig your own holes. Do not pack your own shovel. And please make sure the holes aren't 6 feet down, because you might fucking trip. Thank you.
Aaron made them, but I wanted a kiss.
Okay. Hi. Thank you guys for breakfast.
Make yummy food.
You made yummy food?
They're not American pancakes. I don't know how to make
That's-
American pancakes.
I can tell. Thank you, guys. Continuing with Crowder now.
To understand this, it's natural that this would follow suit. All right, so let's go to the second point
terrible.
here. Normalizing pedophilia. This is happening, right? We normalize it outright right now. Didn't die out in the 70s.
No.
Just, I think we have some overlays here. The pedophilia supporting publications. They've been running stories over the last few years.
Yep.
Yeah, we actually broke the fact that the salon pedophile was the one who was actually still currently grooming children. And then they wrote an article that we were monsters. But let's go.
Okay, so again, I hate saying the same thing, but the mere fact that an individual, in Crowder's eyes, this individual is a horrible representation for LGBTQ as a community, or even just as a concept, does not somehow invalidate that entire community. It doesn't.
Go on to how they've been pushing it in a different way. By the way, hit the notification bell if you haven't already, because subscriptions don't mean anything. Of course, join Mug Club.
It's true, subscriptions actually don't mean anything. Beneath the Glass says, well, you don't seem like a nice person, so I wouldn't go around to your house or believe your argument. Bye. Well, I'm glad to know that you've committed the genetic fallacy. I'm okay with that. Your argument is wrong because you were not nice. Okay, my argument was wrong because you decided to walk into my house and tone police me. Okay. That's fine. I don't owe you the courtesy of being nice to you, and in fact, actually, people who've watched my channel long enough have seen my interactions with Matt Powell. They've seen me not being nice. The way that I went about that argument, relatively speaking, was neutral. If you would like to see not nice, I can do that. But I don't think you want to see not nice from a rhetorician. That gets really yikesy really fast.
Battlecredit.com/mugclub. You get a full daily show. Subscribe on iTunes for exclusive audio content, and please leave us a rating there. Here's something else that's been going on for a long time. Child drag queens.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Jenny 7, why don't subscriptions mean anything? Subscription, all the subscription does is it increases the chance that your channel might be in somebody's recommended feed. And it gives them access on their left sidebar to go to their subscriptions and then look at your channel quickly. That, however, doesn't do anything to help you as far as getting your channel to more people. It doesn't mean as much as it should. Subscriptions do matter for the algorithm, but when it comes to seeing content and seeing content when it is available, as opposed to subscriptions, then you would want something like this. This guy up here, this guy right up here that Raz is looking down at on, that guy is going to let you know when new content is out much more often than anything else. And in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and let it play since we're here. So, that was fun. Jack and Quill says it was more slam dunk, but not really mean. You know, I could do mean, but I decided not to. Also, Raz is hitting the bell very hard. So, continuing on.
I think we have some B-roll. 11-year-old drag queen Desmond. This is called Desmond is Amazing. Stripping at a club, having money thrown at him for people who can't see right now. Look at this. Tell me that isn't disturbing.
Yeah.
Look at this. Is a bull.
Okay, so yeah, it's disturbing. Cool. We're arguing from emotion from Steven Crowder, who I'd imagine agrees with the Ben Shapiro facts over feelings thing. But make an argument, just for fun. Is all dance sexual? Is all dance sexual? Because he's not actually stripping down. He took off a coat. By that argument, if I were to take off, if I were cold and suddenly warm, and I took off a coat, that would be me stripping down. Right? So, again, is dancing inherently sexual? I would argue that yes. That dancing, by its nature, has many sexual elements in it. Given that that's the case, then cool. Desmond simply... that's an argument for children never dancing ever. And I think that's an awkward one. Zalrock donated $5. Steven Crowder going off topic and being a complete bigot, not surprised. No, I'm not. If you do it right with another person, well, yeah.
Boy stripping, and they say there's nothing sexual about this. Stripping and men giving him money. By the way, I got in trouble at 14 for mowing lawns because it was a violation of the Labor Bureau. Remember that?
Okay, what does that have to do with anything? You got in trouble for mowing lawns, and now you're upset that somebody else is able to actually get money through dancing, which takes less effort than you mowing lawns. All it takes is the prep behind it and learning how to do the actual dances. Once you've learned how to do the dances, then you can do them, and it takes a little less effort. You just have to actually be able to get over the performance anxiety of performing on stage. It just seems like Crowder's upset that somebody else was able to earn money younger than he was. But that's just me.
They were like, you're not supposed to do that. It's illegal. What about when they're making it rain on an 11-year-old dressed in Michael Jackson sailor pants?
All the lemonade stands cops have been breaking up around the nation.
And the only reason they're okay with this, by the way, is because it's gay. Can you?
No. I don't think lemonade stand. There are lemonade stands that don't get broken up, and I don't think lemonade stands are a problem. The argument here would not be that this is okay only because it's gay, and that's why this is all right, because the left sees it and they say, oh, it's gay, that's fine. No, the argument here is why do we have to have, like, children who want to earn money, why do they have to go for licensing in order to do that? Christopher says, wait. Sirs, do you have any clue how hard it is to get in drag? That's much more difficult than mowing the lawn. That's why I said prep. Like, prep is the problem. Performance is not. Prep for mowing the lawn is just putting the lawnmower in a truck and then, like, driving it there or pushing it down the road. Whereas the actual action is harder. With the dancing, the prep is harder. Learning the dance, getting over the anxiety, getting in the drag if that's what you're doing. That's much harder than the actual dancing itself in this case.
Can you imagine if it were just a straight strip club with an 11-year-old girl there?
Yeah.
Can you imagine the ramifications there?
What if,
But is she stripping? Is that what's actually happening? Because, again, to make this argument, you would have to then conclude that by the principle of entailment, all dance should be completely illegalized from children. Furthermore, there should not be chaperones at children's dances in places in, like, middle school. Because that's adults watching children dance and therefore sexual. That's a problem. I guess we have to abolish the entire system. Jack and Quill for $2. Fortnite dances sexually. Fortnite dances incredibly sexually. Ben Will, I have a question. So, if I take off my coat, is that me stripping, and therefore by entailment is that sexual? If I happen to be wearing a coat and I'm cold? Because all that was shown in the video that Crowder had there was Desmond taking off a coat. Was that stripping? Mike FC, but they're still sexualizing a kid. Yeah, and I'm okay with that being the argument. But again, the entailment from that argument is that we should ban all dancing of all children ever. Children's dancing should be gone. Chaperones cannot view children's dancing at all because it's sexualizing children. That's where you get. When you use that argument here, that's where it leads.
It would never occur, right? It would never occur to anyone to do that.
Because even if it was someone's fetish, they'd be like, hold on, no, there's other people here. But at this club, they're like, oh, let's roll camera, roll tape, check the gate, repeatedly. They tell us it has nothing to do. Child drag queens, nothing to do with sexuality.
Okay, cool. So, Mike, I have a question. I'll tell you what. I have a coat. I should have one. Right? Yeah, fuck it. I just happen to have a pair of pants sitting on exercise equipment. So, okay. By this nature, right? If anybody's planning on sending a Super Chat or a Streamlabs donation, even like $1 one, I want you to do it directly after I take this off, right? This is where we get to point absurdism. Point absurdism is fun. All right, so I have an extra article of clothing on me, not unlike if I had a coat. Or I guess in this case it's a shawl made of pants. If I take that off and then receive a Super Chat, right? Was that sexual? Because that's the exact same construction we have here. Person takes off an article of clothing by itself, then someone gave them money. Does that make it sexual now? I have taken off one article of clothing. Ashley, for the $2, take that coat off. There we go. I have now performed, per this argument, a sexual act on stream in front of all of you. Cancel me. Cartoon Contrarian with the $2. I am Oddity with the $1. All right, continuing with Crowder's argument.
But then let me ask this. Why is one of them a mascot for an erotic clothing company? Lest you think I exaggerate, here you go. Look, House of Man. Of course, after they were called on it, they tried to scrub the word.
Okay. There's a thing that we do with females as well. Like, yeah, you can say that it's gross. You're an adult, come on, the way the kid was dancing. Mike, your argument was took a coat off and got money. I mean, I could Fortnite dance here as well. I could add dancing to this. Jack says a shawl made of pants, very sexy. Ben Will, are you familiar with the channel Anime Renee? or Renee. I am very familiar with that, actually. Anime is a channel that me and Vosh did a deconstruction on. No, I'm not going to Fortnite dance. Fuck that shit. I hate that dance.
Erotic from their website. Because words, those pesky words, some would argue that actually in a tone-deaf move, they replaced the word erotic with crotchless leather. That doesn't seem like it was well.
Christopher, so isn't his argument a bit of a reductio ad absurdum? I mean, yeah, but the point, it's an improper use of one. The proper use of a reductio is to use it to pass an opponent's argument and see if it passes the reductio check. If it can't pass the reductio check, then the argument falls from that. If you try to use your argument as a reductio here, that's an improper use of reductio. It's an appeal to extreme. Do I know the dance from Haruhi Suzima? Offhand I do, but I'm not... Like, if I look it up, I'll recognize it, because I've been to anime conventions, but it doesn't mean that I know it off the top of my head.
Well time. Again, imagine if it were a 9-year-old girl with a ball gag in her mouth as the face of the Gap, or an erotic...
Okay, see, that, however, is a little bit different, because when we are looking at the ball gag, what is the purpose of the ball gag? Well, the ball gag is a representation of BDSM culture. This is not just sexualizing a child. This is using a child as a poster child for BDSM. Now, here's the reason why I have an issue with this. As somebody who's also part of BDSM culture, one of the biggest things that you are told from any dom, as somebody who's literally gone to a house where a career... Not career dom, but one who actually had, like, a dungeon and would teach people, like, the proper way to fucking whip and the proper way to cane, right? As somebody who's gone to these events and has seen these things and, like, has seen how these things are taught, the biggest thing that is taught is informed consent, safe words, and how to properly manage yourself around multiple people. If you're in an environment where everybody's planning on having sex with each other, but you can have 35 people in the same room and not one of them are groping anybody without consent, you recognize that you're in a well-constructed environment. This is an environment that I found myself in. So again, taking that culture, which is all about informed consent, and all about setting up things that are supposed to be safe for the individuals involved, and then using a child as a poster child for it, a child who, by the nature of being a child in this situation, cannot give informed consent, that is something that I have a problem with. That's not the same thing as just taking off a coat in front of an audience in a dance. That's definitely different.
At a clothing store, you don't see it. By the way, let's scale it back, because you're going to say, a lot of people will say, well, hold on, that's really extreme, right? The drag queen scenario. No, that was trending on YouTube and was supported by the transgender community at large.
Okay. Appeal to extremes are not bad if you're constructing them right. Again.
On shows everywhere.
Let's scale it back. Drag queen story time. Harmless, right? This is just people reading the kids. It happens at libraries.
Oh dear, I think I know where he's going with this.
Libraries across the country. Well, except in a Portland library, it ended up with drag queens dry humping children. They're the pictures. They're the pictures.
Oh,
yeah. So, first of all, is that dry humping?
Country. Well, except in a Portland library, it ended up with drag queens dry humping children.
Like, one, I don't know if I would consider that dry humping, but two, if that is the case, then that's an issue with individual. That is an issue of praxis, of a particular individual doing something with a child that should not happen. If I'm willing to take the argument that this is dry humping and therefore this is very much abusive, then yeah, this is a problem. Is this a problem with simply drag queens telling stories to children? No, that doesn't necessarily follow. The issue is not drag queens telling stories to children. The issue is whether or not one particular drag queen may or may not be engaging in predatory behavior. That is what the question is. It's not a question of, is Drag Queen Story Hour something that has to be canceled immediately because one person did something stupid? If that was the case, I would have to argue then as well that Jessica Yaniv, by all trans people have to be canceled because Jessica Yaniv exists, or Blair White exists. Like, I would have to do that, right? But I don't have to do that because that's not the way that I argue. That's the way that somebody like Steven argues.
They're the pictures. They're the pictures.
Oh,
that is the. By the way, that guy moonlights as a scout counselor. What? No, of course that's not true. What is this
I
room?
wouldn't be surprised.
Drag Queen Storytime Houston ended up with not one, but 2 sex offenders on its roster.
Yeah. Problems with individuals that need to be addressed individually. This is somebody like Steven. So I'm going to imagine that Steven Crowder is the type of person who would argue that there is not any type of systemic racism in the United States, and that the issue is with individuals, and the individuals need to be dealt with on an individual basis. This is not something that like permeates culture. That's what Steven Crowder would argue, right? I feel like I'm steel manning Steven Crowder's position on racism. I feel like it. If I'm not, please let me wrong. Please let me know if I'm wrong in the chat. But if that is his position, and I believe that is from what I understand about Crowder, then this is a different method being used entirely for a different subgroup. Because it can't be a systemic thing, it has to be an individual thing when it applies to something that he likes, but it can't be an individual thing, it has to be a systemic thing when it applies to something that he finds icky.
Circling back to Jessica, the Canadian trans activist, the one who insists that women get their balls waxed is a human right.
It just sounds weird.
Along with internet in Germany, getting your balls waxed as a woman.
Yeah.
Turns out, tried to host a no parents allowed topless pool party for 12-year-old girls. Also,
something we've already covered on here and we have an issue with. I think that that's a piece of shit thing to try to do.
Allegedly tried to show child porn to underage girls. Obsessed about, he was talking about nude girls in locker rooms, asking about tampons. This Jessica, he asked if it's okay.
Okay, again, stop misgendering the person because they're a piece of shit. They are a piece of shit. They're a horrible piece of shit. They should not be allowed to have any conversation with any child at all. This person is no doubt engaging in predatory actions and therefore is a problem. Does not mean they get to be misgendered. You know, actually not. From now on, Steven Crowder is she. Okay, let's take Crowder's logic, right? That because somebody is engaging in shitty behavior, they do not deserve their gender identity. I'm okay with that. Steven Crowder, from here until the time he dies and stops being a shitty individual, gets to be she. Only she, only ever she. Now, I'm not going to do that because I think that's a very shitty thing to do. But I am willing to accept that that would be a logical way to go about this after the point.
For 10-year-old girls.
But I will jokingly say that this is now the show Louder with Stephanie Crowder.
To bear all in the locker room. He asked, sorry, we have to bleep this, do you see tits and pussy ever to 12-year-old girls? Which, by the way, I guarantee you they do. They have them. So this is really just to get, like, he's not even really getting, he's not asking anything.
No.
To which he doesn't know the answer. Do you ever see yourself naked? He was asking them the best way to bond with girls. He was devastated.
Yeah, and why is he trying to do that? Predatory behavior needs to be dealt with. That does not mean there's a systemic issue in the trans community of predatory behavior. Technical says, I don't know how to feel about that. It shows them the point, but then it becomes an I don't wish that on my enemy. No, I understand that. I don't wish that on my enemy. That's why I wouldn't do it. But as a matter of demonstration, I would do it. This is why when somebody refuses to call somebody by their preferred gender, or by their pronoun, or by their real name, or they try to dead name them, I'm of the opinion that I will just call them Tim or Martha. If they are male, I will call them Martha. If they are female, I will call them Tim. And I'll continue to do so until they get uncomfortable and they ask me to stop. And when they ask me to stop, I will ask them why. And when they say that that's not their name or that's not their gender or whatever, then the next logical response is, oh, so now you understand the problem. As soon as the problem gets applied to you, it becomes much easier to understand. This is like how in Hammered Out yesterday, me and Ocean got into the veil of ignorance. And the reason why we got into the veil of ignorance. Somebody not using your name only becomes a problem when it's your name somebody's not using.
Devastated, by the way. He was devastated when it turned out that they weren't just parading around naked in the locker room. He was really upset by it. Yeah. I don't know.
It's not Porky's.
Yeah, that's what he thought. He's going to get a 12-year-old Jessica Andrews scenario.
Just getting off to asking questions to 12-year-old girls. That's sick.
That's so disturbing.
Have you heard about this in mainstream media?
No, and we agree. Yaniv's a shitty person. Continue.
Anywhere? You've heard about the initial story, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, Jessica is explicit that Z is attracted to females and identifies himself as a proud lesbian. So I'm still angling for that available striker spot in the U.S. women's soccer team.
Oh my God. Why? Also, Ariel, would sirs think I am? Was mainly asking him. Ariel, what was the question? Am I a bad person if I want to call her a her as a purposeful insult? Then again, so the mere fact that you want to insult Crowder, I do not find as a problem. But if you think that as a matter of praxis, it's the most useful option as like a standard thing, not just like a demonstration of why the argument's wrong, then that might be an issue. But again, you're an individual. You are not bound by the same like restrictions that somebody who like disseminates information on a public platform is. You do you individually. I can say that I disagree. Again, I would only call Crowder a female as a matter of praxis in an argument, but as a standard method of identification, I wouldn't use it. Making a mistake is okay. Using misgendering as a bully method is wrong. Yep, nope, I'm okay with that statement as well. Bullying is the problem, making mistakes is not. If making mistakes was a problem, then it was a problem that my parents made me.
You might, by the way, see it when we're talking about mainstream. CNN's Chris Cuomo, the DNC pool boy in chief, said that 12-year-old girls are bigots if they don't want to look at grown men's penises. There's the...
Wait. Oh. What do you tell a 12-year-old girl who doesn't want to see a penis in the locker room? I wonder if she's the problem or her overprotective and intolerant dad. Teach tolerance. So, again, this gets weird. Like if a 12-year-old doesn't want to see a penis in a locker room, well, is this an adult's penis? That's an issue. Is this a child's penis that they're trans? Well, again, if they're trans, they're on puberty blockers. They're trying to figure this stuff out. What locker room we put them in, there's a conversation that can be had there. But when it comes to somebody like Jessica Yaniv, we're dealing with somebody who has a penis and is also an adult. And if an adult is showing their genitalia to a child, then the issue is not one of whether or not they're trans. The issue is whether or not they're being predatory. And if you're showing your genitalia to a child at that point, then yeah, no, you're being predatory. Jack and Quill for the $5. Food, $200. Data, $150. Rent, $800. Stream donations, $3,600. Utility, $150. Somebody who's good at the economy, please help me budget this. My family is dying. I feel as though maybe the stream donations is the one that you could cut out on that. I feel like that's the one that could go out of all of these. Also, Matthew Blackman seems to be very vocal about creationism in the chat. What promise has been failed by technology? I'm curious. Since we're here, obviously you won't shut up, so you've got opinions, and I'm curious. I won't shut up either because I have opinions. So please, I'd like to hear them. Seriously, you've never seen that meme before? I have not. I'm used to the meme of like Blue Yeti microphone, $120. Ceramic plate, $3. Cup that I've been reusing for like 5 days, $1. The price, or somebody coming into my chat and being ridiculously wrong on data and points, and I get to sit there and demonstrate that, priceless. Some things you can't buy, but for everything else, there's Walgreens. That's the one that I'm used to. Matthew Blackman, bye. Wait. So, it's amazing how you speak from this ivory tower of empirical knowledge. I'm not actually speaking from an ivory tower of empirical knowledge. I'm an autodidact. Like, I don't have an ivory tower of academia to stand behind. Okay? I barely passed high school. All of this is stuff that I learned on my own after high school. So, I'm not standing on an ivory tower. If I were standing on an ivory tower, I would ask to please give me funding so I could actually get a piece of paper behind me that says that I did so. That would be great. But apparently getting called out on your dumb shit immediately gets you running away in fear. And that's fine. He doesn't have to be banned. But cowardice is always fun. It's entertaining. Let's see if we can't finish the Steven Crowder video.
Tweet.
Yeah. I can't believe that one. How are you supposed to be tolerant of a child seeing a man's penis? Like, how is the word tolerance thrown in there? That should never happen, period. Right?
Yeah,
so why
so.
And Cuomo was saying she needs to be more tolerant. Dad needs to teach her to be. of a guy's penis hanging out?
No.
For
we
your
also need
daughter
more
to
tolerant
see?
of a boy stripping down and having quarters thrown at him at drag queen story time.
Well, at least get some dollars.
Wait. A guy stripping down and having quarters thrown at him during drag queen story. You are aware that like the drag queen story time and the Desmond is Amazing thing happened like separately? Does Crowder realize that, or does Crowder think that all trans issues happen in a vacuum and within a confined space, and they all happen at once? Actually, no, that makes sense. If that is how Crowder views all trans issues, then that would explain why he thinks that predatory natures in the trans community are systemic and not individual problems. Because if he views these things as all happening within a vacuum and in close proximity, then it would make sense that he would then fuck everything else up. Mike MC says, I support these conversations. Keep going. I just disagree. Well, thank you very much for the $2 donation. And I'm actually like, it means a lot to me that even though you're disagreeing, you are still supporting my channel. That means a lot, because I try my very best to not create an echo chamber. This is why I'll challenge some people in the chat and like have that conversation. I don't like echo chambers. I like being challenged. I've been shown where I'm wrong in the past because I've tried my best not to create an echo chamber. Hell, there are people I disagree with on like half the things they think, and they're also my moderators. So thank you for that. It means a lot to me. It really does.
Dollar bills out. Let's have some
The point is that the history, right? The history is this is all founded upon this. The founders of the feast supported pedophilia. All of modern gender theory. Look at Simone de Beauvoir. Look at John Money. Look at all of these. They are the most cited of anyone out there. Yeah. They all supported this. They actively.
Wait. Hold on. I just heard some things. I just heard some things that don't follow. Gender theory supports pedophilia, and gender theorists support it. These are not mutually exclusive. As an example, if I were to find that a predominant amount of physicists, early-age physicists, in, let's say, 150 years in the past, happened to all be religious, and therefore I made the stupid claim that therefore astrophysics supports religion. Everybody in the audience would tell me that that's a nightmarishly bad take, and it's a stupid thing. Like it's a really dumb take, right? Like you guys would jump onto me and dogpile me for that because that's a dumb take. You guys understand that. I would hope I've cultivated an audience of people who understand the problems with that statement. So, if I make a statement like that is that nightmarishly stupid, and then Crowder goes, well, no, that doesn't follow. Okay, cool, that's fine. It doesn't follow. Because it doesn't follow that astrophysics as a study supports religion. That's not how that works. Then it follows that gender, as a theory of study, does not support pedophilia. There may be individual theorists who do support it for one reason or another, strangely. That does not mean that the theory itself necessarily leads to that. It doesn't. If it does, the amount of incredibly stupid takes you have to be able to espouse once you've made that like your paradigm, again, are nightmarish. I don't want to get into all of that.
Signed on to this. They championed this, and the same people, the same organizations who have the ear of everyone at the DNC, who are attacking Mario Lopez.
Yeah.
Look at their platforms. They all support this. This is about as sick as something can get. And this is something that I think everyone needs to think about here. When we talk about our responsibilities as a society, the conversation now is turned to free stuff a lot, right? Our responsibility to provide free school, free healthcare, free tampons. But you know what?
Wait, is that stuff free? Hold up, Crowder. Hold on. If I pay taxes, which my taxes suck, mind you, because when you're self-employed in America, you pay taxes twice. Just so you know. So like YouTube takes its taxes out, and then I have to do more on top of that because I'm self-employed. So again, if I pay taxes and those taxes, part of that is diverted into a social service like public education. does it then follow that that's free if I've paid for it? Does it follow that a government-sponsored organization funded by my tax dollars is free when I paid for it through my tax dollars? Is that... I don't think that's how that works. In fact, actually, I'm 100% certain that's not how that works. That's incredibly dumb takes from Steven Crowder.
Before we get to the free commodities that you would like, not a right, commodities that you would like to not have to pay for, how about we understand the most basic societal responsibility since the beginning of civilization? Not Western civilizations, by the way, unless you try and call this a racist dog whistle for the alt-right. Just civilizations. Yeah. Since the beginning...
You would know all about those, Crowder. Jack and Quill with the $5. YouTube Red to watch without ads, $10. Internet Bill, $80. Super Chat, $5. Introducing Sirs to new memes, priceless. For everything else, there's Amazon.com.
Of human beings, the responsibility to protect the most vulnerable among us. That's why we would send men out and protect the women and children in battle. Right? You send out the strong to protect the vulnerable. Would anyone disagree that the vulnerable would include children?
Yeah.
Yeah. The issue, though, is not whether or not they're vulnerable, though. The issue is whether or not they can give conformed consent to join the military. Are children vulnerable? Yes. Are they more vulnerable and easier to take advantage of in the military and in combat scenarios? Yes. I would argue, though, that the biggest issue comes down at that point to whether or not they can even give consent to throw away their lives in that way, and I don't think that they can. Take a kid who's grown up on playing something like Battlefield or Call of Duty. They see a glorification of this behavior, and they go, oh, okay, I would like to join the military as well. It looks like fun. And then the harsh realities of the military set in. They may survive everything and then just come in with post-traumatic stress disorder. That, in and of itself, is something that could have been prevented by them having an informed decision on the matter. Again, that's the way that Crowder frames these things bothers the fucking crap out of me.
If this is as sick as it gets, and it's mainstream in today's left, it's a consistent pattern. And how often do you hear about this right now from the press? Right now, do this experiment. Go to the homepage at Vox. Go to HuffPo. Go to Salon. Go to the YouTube homepage. Go to their YouTube Heroes Trans LGBTQ AAIP activist page. Is anyone talking about this Jessica business? Will anyone be?
Does it matter? Okay, so here's the reason why that doesn't matter. And I've made this point. Vosh has made this point. Multiple people has made this point. In fact, actually, I Jack and Quill in the chat. Would you be willing to be part of a quick experiment for me? Is that something you're okay with? If not, that's fine. I can do this with a hypothetical. But it works best with a person if they are willing to consent to this experiment. So I will wait for Jack and Quill's response on that, because if they're still in the chat, okay, sure. All right, so Jack and Quill, is it incredibly important for you to speak about the Jessica Yaniv situation? Like, do you have to? Is that a thing that, like, you must do? It is a moral imperative for you to speak up about Yaniv, how Yaniv does not represent trans people. Or is this just something that should be fucking understood by every human being on the planet? By the same reasons that, like, I don't have to speak up that all white people are not like Donald Trump. I think that's just kind of an understood thing. Cartoon Train, anyone catch the P that he spotted in there? I didn't catch it, actually, but thank you for notifying me that was in there. The only reason that I use Jack and Quill is because Jack is a personal friend of mine. So, like, I figured that if anybody would be willing to take part in this experiment, it would be somebody who I consider a friend. No, I don't need to, but I feel I should. Yeah, but you feel you should for personal moral reasons, but it is at a standard that somebody else outside of yourself should hold you to. Because, like, me personally, I would not hold you to say that you must speak on social media about the Jessica Yaniv situation. Sometimes P stands for pan or poly. It's not always a dog whistle. I recognize that it's not always a dog whistle. But I also recognize that Steven Crowder exists, and therefore the principle of charity does not get really applied to him as often as he might deserve otherwise. Allow me just 1 second. Yes? I've sent you a message on Discord. Please respond there. I've sent you a message on Discord. All right. That said, I've only got like maybe 2 minutes left because after this, I have to do a D&D thing. So we're going to finish up Crowder's dumb shit real quick.
Talking about this segment. I guarantee you they won't unless it's expressing outrage and offense over the serial sex-offending tranny pedophile, sorry. Why? Because I misgendered him. That's what they'll be upset about. Yeah, because priorities.
That's not a priorities thing. I can be upset about the exact same thing. I can be upset about both. I am upset about both. So it's very disingenuous for Crowder to say, that's the thing that they're going to be upset about. No, I can be upset about both. I can say that misgendering is completely useless in the situation, adds nothing to the conversation. But yeah, Jenkel says, I got to get to work now. Sorry, bye. Hey, that's fine. Thanks for participating in the experiment, Jack. And I'm sorry if that seemed like really pointed, but I wanted to use that as a way to show that very, very quickly, a trans person, by merit of being trans, does not necessarily have to speak up about the Jessica Yaniv situation. Just like I don't have to speak up about Donald Trump by merit of being white.
So it's really important just to understand how this has been creeping in for a long time, the basis for modern gender theory, and how far we've gone. And that's why you don't apologize. Mario Lopez, what are you thinking, AC Slater? Hey there.
Okay, now, I can't stand the way that that's phrased. It's not a that's why you don't apologize thing. It's not a this is why this is okay thing. This is Crowder. This is just Crowder being dumb and Crowder being stupid. But that's, how things work for Crowder. Anyway, I would do a more succinct synopsis of this conversation that happened. But I can't because I have to hop out. So, thank you guys for being here with me. I hope I've articulated my positions throughout this video as best I can. And if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and all that other fun stuff. If not, then you've already told me, I'm sure. With that said, thank you guys for watching, and I will